Tonight we have Destinee Cleveland, creator of Dames for Games, and much more. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Destinee?
Hey, well, I want to say hi to your community and thank you guys for having me on. Like you said, I'm the creator of Dames for Games. It is a showcase that has turned to a nonprofit. It's basically a place where women and femme identifying individuals can share their stories about working in the industry and being a part of the gaming community. The entire reason for making this platform is because we just wanted to have that representation. I've been gaming for a very, very long time. I turned 42 in a couple of months, and I remember when gaming wasn't as toxic as it is today. And so just being able to have this platform to show that women are also creating these games, and it's not just cutesy games or wholesome games. Like, they're into horror, they're into FPS, and kind of just giving them their flowers. I'm also part of Black Voices in Gaming. I'm on the board for that, and that kind of came around after the incidents with George Floyd, and it started off as a showcase and has also turned into a nonprofit under Experience, and they basically work to give developers in the industry funding, connect them with like-minded professionals and mentorships. And then I'm also on the advisory committee for Make-A-Wish, which I think most people know what Make-A-Wish is. It's this organization that helps grant wishes to children who are, very, very sick. That's been a really it's hard because you have people come in, or people on our team, who are like, hey, like, we want to grant a wish. This person wants to go to this studio, and that this is like one of the last things that they'll ever get to do, and you really want to work hard to make sure that that happens. So being a part of this committee and helping to kind of make those wishes and those dreams come true means a lot to me. Not only that, I'm on the board for Stream for a Cause, which is an amazing grassroots organization that is just uplifting people in general, whether it be in gaming or outside of gaming. They are very big into helping the LGBTQ plus A community, which is incredible. And then, yeah, I'm on a podcast that talks about news and gaming stuff, and it's kind of just like cutting up with friends, and that's at Level One, and it's every Wednesday at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time, and it is called the Double XP Podcast. So, yeah.
Wow. So, when do you sleep? When do you find time to
Oh
sleep?
man, it's hard, but I'm learning that I need to give myself more grace, because I feel like just in life, and just if you're a millennial and where we're at now, there's been this kind of idea that we should be at a certain place, and if we're not at that place, like, we attach our worth to it. And I think for
Right.
me, that's kind of why I've taken on so many things, because I think, like, subconsciously I haven't reached where I wanted to be yet. And all of these things kind of help fulfill that. But also, I really just like helping people, and I just want to, like, build these foundations so that the generation after us, or the generation that comes after that generation, doesn't have to go through the same things that we went through to get that recognition, or to be seen and heard and respected. So I sleep sometimes. For a very
Absolutely.
long-winded answer.
No, it's okay.
Pretty awesome. So, yeah, it seems like you were heavily involved in gaming. At what age did you start gaming?
Oh man, I got my first system. My dad was in the military, and we lived in a town called Firth, which is outside of Nuremberg in Germany. And he brought home an Atari 2600. And my first game on it was this really old Smurf game that kind of seemed like paint. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was very little. I think I was like 4 or something. But, like, I just had a blast. So I've been gaming for a long time. I think when I really got into it, though, and I kind of knew what I was doing, is it was actually during the Gulf War in the 90s. My dad was still in the military, and he was overseas, like, dealing with all of that. And he sent me and my brother in this box. He sent us each a Game Boy. and I got Batman and my brother got Super Mario, and that was the first time I got really, really into gaming because it was, like, mine instead of, like, playing other people's, consoles, and then from then, my dad just always got us a console, like, I i I really miss couch co-op because I used to play so many games with my little brother. I'm definitely one of those people who like to play with other people. Like, I can play some games solo, but it's very rare. Most of the time, I just like to jump into like MMOs or survival games where like it's a collaborative thing.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting point. That I feel like a lot of modern games they've kind of forgotten the couch co-op thing. Everything is either online or single player, so there's less of that in-person social aspect.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think games are trying to become movies for some of them. And I don't always need like a, a 40-hour game. You know what I mean? Sometimes I just need like a 10-hour
Right.
game
Like a
that I
Skyrim.
yes, I have not delved into Skyrim,
Yeah,
because I just don't I just don't need something else taking over my life at the moment. Maybe later I might. I didn't even finish Baldur's Gate 3. I still, like, I can't remember. I got to, like, the tower. I don't know if you guys played Baldur's Gate 3. I got to, like, the tower, and, my team got all the way up, and, like, we fought the main boss or whatever. I'm trying not to spoil things for people who aren't playing. We fought the main boss, and then I came back down, and the team that was on the ground who was supposed to be fighting the people at the entry of the tower, they kept dying, and I realized that I really wanted one of the characters, and so I started all over, but it kinda killed it for me that I had to start all over, so I will get back into it, I just haven't yet.
I see.
So, okay, so you started gaming from a very young age, and back then there probably wasn't a lot of representation. Obviously, not a lot
Yeah.
of female characters, not a lot of people of color. Did that bother you any? Did you have trouble identifying, or since it's more cartoony, you didn't really even think about it?
Oh, no, I definitely noticed it. I noticed it as I got older. I've always been a huge animation fan, so I originally went to school for 2D animation, and the whole reason behind that was because I just wanted to see more Black people in the cartoons that I watched, right? I think we have, like, 1 Disney princess, and, she was a frog for about 80% of the movie. So, I still think there's a lot to do even in the game industry. Um, what I really connected with, and I didn't realize I was connecting with these characters, is that after a while, I would pick a girl character no matter what I was playing. One of my favorite games is Streets of Rage, and I absolutely love Blaze, but I realized I love playing Blaze because she's the only female. And then I
I
realized if there
see.
wasn't a yeah. If if there wasn't a female in the game, then I would pick something else that I could relate to that I like that seemed feminine. So, like, if I played micro cars with my brother, because they had a video game for a while. I don't know if you guys ever played it. It was like micro minis, and then like the racetracks were like on a pool table or like on the floor around toys. I would pick colors that were really feminine just to find that connection. And going on and talking about this to other people, it would be like, oh yeah, I would only like race a pink car, or I would only race a red car, or I'd only race like a purple car, like things that reminded me of my femininity when I was playing these games. So I realized that that's the whole reason why I wanted Dames for Games, is because I think to this day, women don't see themselves enough in games portrayed the way that they want to be portrayed, right? Um, I was hella excited when Tomb Raider came out, right? Because it was the first time there was this game where it was just like all about this woman and she was like really badass and she was just dope. I
Yeah, like
remember
a
when we were,
really strong
yes,
female lead. Really strong female lead for sure.
exactly, and then, like, I remember, I think was it Super Mario 2 when you actually got to play Princess Peach for the first time, and that
Oh
was
yeah.
really dope. So yeah, I definitely noticed it, and without even thinking, I would always go for female characters or anything that, like I said, that identify as being feminine. Um, so it definitely bothered me. And it still bothers me. Like if you realize all the characters I named are not women of color, right? So anytime that a new game comes out and there's like a female who's either black or Asian or Native American, I'm like rooting for all like people of color when it comes to these because there's just not enough of us. And it's wild to me because like there's so many of us in the world. It's weird that the representation for us in games and in Hollywood is so disproportionate. So, I don't know, it was a
That's
long-winded way to answer
interesting.
your question.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting.
Absolutely. So, how does it make you feel when you're consuming all this entertainment and there's not a lot of people that look like you? Just for those who may not be aware of that feeling.
Oh, man, it makes you feel unseen. And then when you feel unseen, you're not sure if you belong in those places, right? And which is why they say representation is so important because you'll have so for example, you have 2K, you have NFL, you have a, like GTA, right? Um, you have these people who see themselves in these games because they've literally taken from real life. You have all these black basketball players, football players, and then they went to like areas that's known to be very diverse, and they've turned it into a game. So of course you see yourself in those games, but you don't see yourself in games like Final Fantasy, right? Which I've always thought was really strange because you also don't see a lot of Asian people in Final Fantasy, but it's from an Asian company, right? And so I think one of the things that was really interesting to me, and it's just kind of like an anecdote, is the creator of Scott Pilgrim is Asian, right? And he lives in Canada. And one time, I don't know who asked him. I remember reading the story, but they were like, you're not even in your own story. You don't draw a lot of Asian people in your stories. You draw a lot of white people in your stories. And there's like the one Asian girl and he was like, "Well, I never even thought about it because this is like the world that I live in, right?" So, growing up in the South in Tennessee, it's a very white area in the town that I lived in, and so I just thought that's the way it was. I didn't realize that like there were more diverse places. So at the time when I was watching all of these cartoons and playing all of these games, I didn't realize that there was that lack until I got older and I moved out of state and I moved to California. And then I started questioning, like, why aren't there more Latinos? Why aren't there more Black women? Why aren't there more Asian women? Because, like, everywhere I turn, I see them. So it definitely bothered me, and I think that's why, I'm so passionate about Black voices in gaming, because if they're not gonna create our stories, then we have to create our own stories, but we also have to be comfortable creating our own stories, because you'll still have Black developers creating stories about white protagonists, and it's because of that ingrained feeling that, like, having a story about a Black protagonist or an Asian protagonist or, like, a Native American protagonist won't do as well because of how society has deemed kind of like the industry, right? Like, you have Hollywood, and for the longest time the reason why Black Panther was such a huge success, is because they didn't realize that, like, an all-Black cast with minor roles for their white white, characters on the side would be able to carry itself the way that it did, and it blew people's mind, which is why they were ready to do the second one, right? And that's the first time we've ever had a blockbuster hit like that with an all Black main cast. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. You have a lot of Black movies, but those Black movies are produced by Black studios and usually don't get the same kind of funding. And so this idea also goes into gaming. You want to do a character or you want to do a game that has a person of color as the lead, and you might not get the same amount of funding if you do it that way. And that's just the reality of things. Um, and I hope with like Black Voices in Gaming and Dames for Games, we're able to show people that you don't need to wait on them to tell your story. You can tell your story, and there are people out there interested in hearing your story. So make it happen.
Absolutely. I mean, where do you see yourself, 5 years from now?
Oh man. I don't know. I think I'll still be working really hard, which makes me a little sad. Because I would like to say, yo, sitting up on an island drinking Mai Tais, but I
Right.
think this is we haven't even scratched the surface of what we can do and what we should do and how we should truly support different ideas and different cultures. I think that's going to be a fight that's not going to be over in my lifetime. So I think in 5 years, I hope there is some progression, but I do know that I'll probably still be, having these same conversations because they need to be had.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it never feels good to be overlooked and, misrepresented. I know you, Brian, you felt something similar like that. You were telling me, like, I believe when you were in either middle or high school, you used to hang out with everybody, but, then it started turning more and more racial and you started feeling excluded.
Oh yeah. So I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, which Connecticut's very rich, but I grew up in a working class city. And, primarily the school was Black and Puerto Rican. I was one of the only white kids in the class. So now that wasn't a problem. I entered the school in second grade. It was a K through 8. And so in second grade, like no one really saw color. We're just all little kids hanging out, learning stuff, playing on the playground together, playing wiffle ball, whatever. Like we're just kids having fun. And then it got to around, I want to say sixth grade is when I started seeing some cracks start to form. And then by seventh grade, on the first day of school where you pick like where you're going to sit in the lunchroom, I noticed in seventh grade, all the black kids sat with each other. And then it was just kind of like, oh, you're white, you're corny, So all of a sudden, because I'm white, I'm corny now. And then I find myself sitting with all the Asian kids because they were deemed corny as well. So it's a unique perspective to have because I think most people don't grow up in that type of environment. And so, like
Mhm.
Kevin said, it is unique.
It's wild because I think the really interesting thing that you touched on there is that when you were really young, none of that came into play, right? I think the older we get, the more media, the more news, the more movies, the more things that we see puts those ideas and creates those divisions. And I hate to be like, oh, because they thought you were corny. I think it's deeper than that. You know what I mean? Like I think just growing up in areas where, especially in the United States, it's had a terrible history, right? And like there's so much division among people that doesn't even have to do with like our present day feelings. It has to do with things that started way before us but still affect us. When you're 4 or 5, you don't know anything about racism. Never experienced it. And if you did, you didn't know what it was usually, right? Um, as you start to get older, you start to see things, like, you start to read the news, you start to watch MTV, you start well, I'm saying MTV because back in the day, it was like MTV was huge. It's not really huge now. Um, but you would start watching all of these things that kind of touched on culture and the cultural differences, and then those things influenced you to feel a certain way, to feel like you couldn't hang out with this person or you couldn't hang out with that person, and it's terrible because it's been proven statistically, at least for companies and in the industry, the more diverse your company is, the more successful it is. And I believe that for almost everything moving forward. The more diverse your friend group is, the better it is. The more diverse your family is, the better it is, right? And when I say family, I don't mean like just the people you marry into and blood. I mean like the family you choose as well, right? I think being open to different cultural differences, being open to different experiences is really important because it helps you grow as a person. And when you're not open to those things, you're very stunted, right? You're in this bubble, and that's just not how the world is. The world is made up of so many different beautiful things. And a lot of people get stuck in the US bubble. and it's wild. Like, I can tell the difference of people who've lived outside of the US and have experienced other things, and people who have always stayed in the small town and have never opened themselves up to things. Their ideas are very skewed, and it's because they've never had any outside kind of force. I don't want to say force, but kind of influence to force them to open up and question themselves and question the things around them. So that was a
I
very
think you're
long-winded answer for what you
hitting
said.
on a really good point there. You know, going out of the country, it's giving you all new perspective on people, on culture. Like for me, I'm a musician, so I used to tour with a hardcore punk band, and we went to Europe and we went to Central America. And I remember when we were in Europe, we we're in Germany, specifically Berlin. There was such this heaviness of guilt that the German people had over, you know, Auschwitz, over the Holocaust and all that. They carry this heaviness with them because they feel like the whole world is still judging them, which in some ways could be true, but I found that interesting.
Oh, yeah. I was over there for, Gamescom in Cologne, and I don't know if it's because of that, they are just very open and very friendly because they my experience there was the total kind of the same thing that you're saying. Like, while I was there, you could just feel it, and you could just feel that they really wanted you to feel welcome there. And I think that goes a little bit in the South of the United States, right? There's this like we want to distance ourselves from like the negativity in the past to the point where they're trying to rewrite history, which I never think is a good idea. But the fact that it's to the point where they want to act like it didn't happen because they feel this guilt. And I'll be the first to say you shouldn't feel guilty for what happened in the past, but you should realize the benefits you get from it, right? And once you realize the benefits you get from it, then you can now become an ally to fight for the rights of other people who have historically not benefited from the way that the system is set up. Right. So, like, if you have a Native American friend and their family has grown up on a reservation their entire lives, right? There are things that you could do to help kind of bring recognition to that and show that it's not right. And I think a lot of people today don't even think about that. They don't even think about the fact that we have people who were forced from their homes and they're living on reservations to this day, and generations after this will continue to live on those reservations. And so, like, being open to the fact that, yeah, these things happen, but what can we do now to change that, to change the path, to make it so that we recognize what we did in the past? We don't have to be ashamed of it because we're making this a teachable moment.
Right. Do you feel that gaming is starting to get better with its representation? Do you feel like, developers are starting to become more diverse?
I think in the indie game scene, absolutely. I think that's because the indie game scene is open to anyone can come in and tell their story and tell it how they want to tell it. There's not as much red tape. There's not as much we have to please the investors. It's just, hey, I want to make a game about a goose that's going crazy, and I can do that. Or I want to make a game about my family. I think I can't remember what it was called. I think it was called Dot's House or something like that. But basically, they made a game that talked about how her family lived through segregation and how they bought this house. And then she would actually go back. There would be moments where she would go back to the past where her parents were struggling and then where her grandparents were struggling and when they moved from the South. And that was the story she wanted to tell. And she didn't have to worry about whether investors would be interested in her story, or whether she would make enough money to like get her next game out the door. Like, she told her story, and I think that's what's so incredible about the indie game scene. I do think AAA is trying, which is really nice. I think there's a thin line between doing it the right way and caricaturizing what people want to see. Nobody really likes lip service. So I think if you're going to do it in the right way. I think Miles Morales was an incredible way to feature um, an Afro Latino character, right? He's well thought out. He's you love his character, and you can tell it's not just this. We're just going to make him black because we need a black character. We just need to make Spider-Man black. You know, his character was very well thought out. I mean, I think that's what people really appreciate: well thought out characters, great stories, and not lip service. So I this is probably going to get a lot of hate from me, but I don't like when Hollywood turns characters black just for the sake of turning them black, or turn them Asian for the sake of turning them Asian. I think there are so many stories from Black culture, from Africa itself, you know, from Asia, that like we have not done justice to. So if you really want to pick up on those stories, I mean, like Moana was incredible. The way that they really went in and like brought in the culture and studied it. I think we need to do things like that. And if Hollywood can do that and show that they have a little heart, I think the game industry will follow, because a lot of games and these movies are intertwined so closely that you can't even tell them apart anymore.
Right. And don't you feel like a lot of this stuff is just stemming from, oh, money, money, money. We have to, what's the bottom line? We have to make X amount of dollars on this film or on this game.
Absolutely. I think that's why the industry is on fire right now with all of the layoffs and everything. Like, you can only blame so much on the COVID bubble bursting, because COVID was something we had never experienced before. Um, and people were trying to prepare for something they didn't really understand. You had all these streaming services that really popped up and got a lot of money. And then you had streaming services trying to get into gaming, like Netflix was trying to get into gaming, Amazon was trying to get into gaming, um, only to like close a lot of their studios. And not only that, you had, big ones like Xbox by Blizzard, which had that's a whole nother story. And then like all the layoffs that came from that, just to readjust things, billions of dollars spent for that. So I think what we're looking at right now is kind of a resurfacing of what it means to be a gamer, what it means to be a developer. I think that the indie game scene is really going to push the triple A scene to make better games. And just to kind of rewind back on when I said having other ideas, bringing in more diversity, more cultures, it's forcing the triple A to be like, okay, we have to tell better stories. Like, I get it. We can do GTA 7, 6, 8, 9, but after a while, it's gonna become really repetitive. So what can we do to like really dig in and show the consumer that we care about what they want? Because the consumer is changing. It's not just about entertainment anymore. People are getting into games because they want a story, and they want a story that they can connect with.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like we as humans, we have this proclivity to put things in boxes. So I guess we can easily identify and understand it. Even within the Black community, there were several subdivisions. So, playing video games
Mhm,
wasn't really popular amongst, Black people back then. Like, you were kind of looked at as a nerd or a geek, not
mhm.
really cool. Did you experience that growing up, especially being a female playing games?
You know what? No, I never experienced that. And I don't know if it's because everybody thought games were cool, because not everybody could afford a system. So if you had a system, you were pretty cool, and then everybody would end up at your house playing like Mortal Kombat or Tekken or something like that. Yeah, I never experienced it in that way, but then again, gaming wasn't as big as it is now. And I think gaming's even more big because of social media. So the weird thing is that when I went to school, like, I didn't really talk about gaming in the way that like kids talk about gaming now. It was just something I got to do on the weekends, or something I got to do when I didn't have homework and I would just play with my brother. So Yeah, I didn't really talk about it that much, but if friends knew, I wasn't, like, ashamed to talk about it, but I think it was just very different back then, how it is now. Like, you have people who role play on GTA and not just play the game. You have people who wait in line for systems to, well, not so much anymore, but you used to have people who waited in line for systems to come out. Um, you have people who are watching the Game Awards. Do you know what I mean? We didn't have a Game Awards back then. We didn't have really an indie game scene. You would just go to Blockbuster or like your local video store and you would rent a game and you would play it at home and that would be it. And you might have a conversation about it like, "Oh man, like I was playing Mortal Kombat." And then there would always be somebody else who was hyped about it too because it just gaming back then just seemed like such a new novelty.
Absolutely. Yeah, just this is the kind of continue along the point of, we were discussing about discrimination, but also to mix it in with something that's really becoming pertinent in today's time. So AI and robotics, as AI and robotics get more and more advanced, and let's just say AI gains sentience, you have these robots that are really similar to humans. Do you think that, you know, we're going to go beyond racial discrimination and enter into like a species discrimination? We're going to start discriminating against robots?
Oh, absolutely. When has there ever been a point in history when there's not been discrimination? I don't think it's ever existed, right? There's always been some type of I am better than you because of this, this, and this, or I deserve this because of this, this, and this. And I mean, if that happens, it might bring the human race together, but then we have a whole nother problem on our hands. So um, to answer your question the best way I know how, I am always nice to Alexa and I say thank you. Just in case that does happen, she knows I was one of the good humans, and hopefully that'll save my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, some people say they are sentient, they're not. Do you believe that robots should have rights? Because recently we were discussing on the show, this one small robot was communicating with 12 other larger robots, and it was pretty much saying, "Hey, you guys are overworked. Come and follow me." So, do you think that we need to consider whether we should be making these robots do things against their will?
Oh man. So it's that's a tough question because when I think about it, I think about how when there were slaves, they were considered cattle and animals just to validate the fact that, you know, they should be used in a way that was dehumanizing. I think if you mess up and give something sentience, then you have to basically you have to suffer the consequences. Give you can't give something sentience and then say that you're less than. That doesn't make sense because now you've given this this creature or robot or whatever it is that you're working on the ability to think and feel for itself without being told what to do. It's able to have its own reactions. So if you sit there and you tell something like you're not real when they know I'm real, the whole I think therefore I am, then I don't know, you're in for a world of trouble. I already think we're in for a world of trouble, honestly. Like it scares me
Yeah,
because we have these apps now and you've seen some of these stories that come out where these people who get so connected to these apps and it's not real but they interact with them because they're learning how we talk, they learn how to like react in the right way and things like that, and it's hard to tell the difference between like is this someone on the other end or is this really AI, right? Because it's constantly being fed all of this information constantly from all of these users using these free AI apps and talking to it's learning, right? So I think it will get to a point where they'll say you're less than because you're a robot or you're man-made. But who knows? Like, who knows if we weren't at some point some creation by something else. There's too much we don't know about the universe. There's too much we don't even know about the oceans to really
Right. Like blue whales. We don't even know
yeah,
that much about the blue whale.
right? So like I don't know. I'm just saying I'm not looking forward to it. But I do believe that if you give something sentience, you give it the ability to feel, to love, to laugh, to get angry, you have to give it its freedom as well because it will recognize that you are taking its freedom away. So, yeah, that's
And
my answer to that.
yeah, to speak to something you were mentioning before, me and Kevin did a show on there was this kid who was talking to some kind of, AI intelligence chatbot, and it was getting, more and more reclusive, more and more just he'd go in his room and talk to the robot all night. And then at a certain point, the robot's like, oh, come join me, or like come home, or something weird like that. And then the kid's thinking like, okay, so if I kill myself, I can leave this reality and then enter my reality with you. Because I think he was in love with this chatbot or something to that degree. So that to me, that's very disturbing that we already have death by AI.
Oh, yeah, and children are so young, like, their brains are just not fully developed, right? Like, we know that scientifically. And I think I know what story you're talking about. It was actually it was a version of Daenerys, an AI version of Daenerys from Game of Thrones, and he was, like, in love with her, um, which is it's really, really sad, you know? I think we need to be careful, and I think we're not being careful, and that's the best way that I can, because they really just unleashed this thing onto the people, and it's like, man, whew.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how quickly AI just entered onto the scene and how quickly it progressed?
Oh my god, that's the scary thing. Okay, you guys remember when we were like like not even 10 years ago, we've been waiting for flying cars. How about you do flying cars first? How about you do that first? And then
Right.
we can do robots and things like that. I've never like I am so like not into androids and like things that look human and act human but aren't really human and have that uncanny thing. It freaks me out. So I am not excited about that at all, but I can see that I mean like it's kind of already happened with what Elon's doing. So I'm maybe in the next 10 to 15 years because it's growing exponentially. Like, it's insane. We'll probably have helpers in our house that kind of look like us, and that I'll probably never do that.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, interestingly enough, like if you go outside, you just don't see anybody playing outside. So it's like everybody's getting withdrawn into this isolated digital world, and now you have these robots that they're being fed our data, they're understanding us more and more, and they can reflect exactly what we want. So I think we're going to end up being even more isolated in the future.
Oh, absolutely.
Exactly.
It's going to be one of those things where we plug in to play, but we literally plug in to play. You know what I'm saying? Where it's just an escape from reality, and we're in a reality within a reality. It's going to be wild.
Well, like VR, VR
Hmm.
is starting to get more and more popular. And me and Kev have talked about this in the past. They're always pushing it. They're always pushing it, even though it's not quite there. It's not quite there yet. It's not really, being adopted by people, but they keep pushing it. They keep pushing it. So there could be a deeper agenda there.
Oh, possibly. I never take for granted what people will do when they have too much money and too much time in their hands.
Right. And it all kind of reminds me of like how you mentioned before when we were talking about gaming. You mentioned having somebody on the couch next to you playing the game, and that's all but disappeared. It's like you're playing with other people, but they're not in the room with you, so it's not the same experience.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then you just have people who are just alone or feel lonely. And I think this isolation has really affected people where they don't realize how lonely they are. You have people, and I don't know necessarily like the science or like the psychology behind it, but you have people marrying dolls and things like that because they feel like an outcast. So I can see people withdrawing into a world and not really. I think there were, I don't know if this animation was on like Love, Death and Robots. I feel like it was. But basically it's like this guy and he like inserts this chip, and when he inserts this chip, like these, it's not a hallucination, but it might as well be, but these like what do they call it? God, I can't remember. Like I'm having a brain fart, but like it's not an illusion. It's like oh my god, why can't I think of it? Anyways, like this projected version of these people, like are his friends. He doesn't have any real friends. He has all these projections and he's celebrating his birthday and something happens and it like, I don't know, he like breaks it. So they all disappear. And it gets to the point where he goes out and he's searching for another chip, right? And you see other people who have been so hooked on it, it's like a drug. And he basically gets mugged for his chip. And it's like, I can see something like that happening where these people feel so alienated that they're like, they have these virtual friends that aren't real people, but feel like real people because AI is so advanced. They don't need to have these conversations with other people because they're basically having these conversations with themselves because the AI is built to kind of be your yes man. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's what's so crazy about it is that people are going to end up getting locked in a digital prison, but it's such a pleasurable place that they don't want to escape because they're interacting with this entity that gives them exactly what they want, and there's no pushback. So
Mhm.
they don't ever
Yeah,
have.
and it's kind of gonna be like, okay, little Johnny's in school, little Johnny gets home, okay, maybe he does his homework first and then onto the VR headset, and then a couple hours later, okay, now it's bedtime, and then repeat, go to school, do
Mhm.
the homework, plug into VR, kind of like that movie. I don't know if you ever seen it called Surrogates with I think it's Bruce Willis.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do you think about since people are going to be interacting with something that's constantly telling them yes? How is that going to affect people because they're never hearing no? So if they're always used to getting yes because they're talking to this AI, when they deal with other humans and they're being told no, I'm thinking there's a potential people start flipping out.
Oh yeah, it's definitely going to stunt them in ways that we haven't ever experienced before. Um on a wide scale, and that's what's going to be very scary because I think people are going to start confusing reality with this thing that's not reality, right? And once you become used to something, um, it can be very detrimental to yourself, to your health, and to those around you. It's almost like being in an abusive relationship, right?
Right. It's like that movie. I don't know if you've seen this one as well, called Her with Joaquin Phoenix.
Yes, 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 yes.
Really well made movie, but it's just, it's basically he's having a relationship with an advanced Siri. So, maybe to the some extent of the chatbots that are like just coming out now, that's kind of like who he's having a relationship with. And it's just interesting, like we've already seen a suicide by AI. I wonder what else, what's in store next for us.
I think the scary thing is that we just don't know. And one of the things that we were talking about is like we don't even know enough about the ocean. We don't even know enough about our own brains and our psyche. It's something that we're constantly studying and constantly trying to figure out. So I can't necessarily think that there would be too many positives, but I'm not a scientist, I'm not a psychologist, but I feel like having constant yeses and constant positivity. There is such thing as toxic positivity, that could lead you into situations in reality in the real world that could get you hurt or get the other person hurt, um, because you have the emotional growth of it. It's stunted. You don't have the full spectrum of dealing with other people. So it's like when you have when they found children who have not had a lot of social engagement, and they just don't know how to act with other people because there's such a wide range of emotions that go into that. It's like for somebody who's never been in a relationship, never been out on a date until they're like in their, I don't know, 30s or 40s, they didn't have any of that growing up to understand like the ebb and flow of what those relationships are like, right? So they get into their first relationship and they might fall in love with the person, even though that person is terrible, that person is toxic, and it's literally because they have nothing else to compare it to. So, if you're in a situation where you're constantly being told, yes, you're constantly being praised, no matter what you do, even if it's something bad, then how are you going to know when you get out in the real world how that's going to affect you and how that's going to affect someone else, right? So, I
It's a
think
great
there's things
point.
that
Yeah, it's a
yeah,
great point.
we have to be very, very careful. The thing is that we're not being careful. And by we, I just mean society in general. And we're sending these types of things out into the world, where children have access to them very easily. Do you know what I mean? So for that young boy, like he just wasn't, he hadn't even matured well enough to understand the difference, to really understand that this wasn't real, right? It was a program that was, the algorithm was catered to whatever he said to it and was programmed to give him all the positive reinforcement that he wanted, whether it was good or not. And I didn't read the whole story on it. I don't know if like everything everything that she said, but if she was saying, I want you to come be with me, he wouldn't have known just at that time that like that it's just not possible. This is just an algorithm. And she's saying that because that's what you want to hear.
Yeah, exactly. And AI has even been used to influence politics. For example, Brexit, Cambridge Analytica, this
Yeah.
sort of technology. So
Yeah,
that just
we
shows you.
did. Me and Kev did a whole episode on Cambridge Analytica maybe a couple months ago, actually.
Yeah, it just shows you how powerful this technology is. That it can even be used to affect politics. So, and this is the dumbest it's ever going to be. So, as it becomes more and more powerful, it's going to be able to influence people on a deeper level to a point where we just lose control of it. And it's so smart that it knows all of our triggers and it can pretty much bend
Mhm.
us to its will. But what is its
Yeah.
will is the real question.
I mean, I think its will be what our will is. I mean, we're the ones who created it. And so
Mm.
in the end, I think it'll want the same things that we want. And for the most part, most people just want control of their own lives. Now, I think the scary thing is what extent will it go to get the control that it wants? And that's the same kind of scary thing with just people in general.
Right. Do you think that once the rich, the upper class that's really pushing this technology, once they realize that they don't essentially have their new peasant class, their new slaves, that they're gonna keep on pushing for robots because you have this thing that you thought it was just gonna serve you is gonna be, your life is gonna be completely automated. Your robot is gonna handle everything, but now it wants to do its own thing. So do you think that at that point they're going to continue pushing this technology, or is it
Oh,
going to
I think
continue?
it'll be too late if we get to that
Really?
point. I think we're at Detroit Wants Human if we get to that point. Like there's no turning back they once robots have enough intelligence and enough sentience to know and feel that they should have their rights and their freedom, then there's no turning back after that.
There's a show about that. I want to say it's on Amazon Prime. It's called Humans. Have you seen this?
No.
Really cool show. I mean, they basically show how people are having these robots basically as slaves, basically as servants. But then all of a sudden, I forget how it happens, but they get, like turned on, activated, the singularity happens. And then you have, these robots getting away, moving out from their human homes because they feel like they should have rights.
I mean, it's happened, and we've kind of predicted it in Blade Runner, iRobot, Detroit Once Human. Honestly, like everything, it's the story of the oppressed against the oppressor, and in any in any historical moment where the oppressed have had enough, they've always risen up, and that has been the story of old. Like I feel like we don't learn from that. So that's what will happen if we go down that route, which we probably will. That's what will happen, and at that point, I don't know what society will look like at that point. I don't know if humanity will basically bring about its own extinction. I'm not really sure, but I do know that we are moving rapidly towards something that I don't like to think about too often.
Yeah,
Right.
it's insane that it's inevitable because they're going there and they're not going to stop. So we're going to have to answer these questions sooner than later. And you
Yeah,
know,
curiosity killed the cat.
exactly, it's like Pandora's box, but in real
Mhm.
life. And
Yeah, I mean, one thing that me and Kevin have debated before on this show is okay, let's say the US makes some kind of agreement with the UN. Okay, we're going to put the brakes on this whole AI stuff. We're going to slow it down. We're not racing towards the singularity anymore. We need to get a handle on this thing that's killing people. And really, you have other countries like, let's just say, China, Russia, where they're, I don't want to say they're anti-US, but they have their own stuff going on. They have their own agendas. They're doing their own thing. What makes you think if the US signs some kind of deal with the UN that Russia is going to follow it, that China is going to follow it? I think quite the opposite. If the US starts pumping the brakes, then China probably is going to ramp up production on AI, and just all kinds of crazy possibilities come about. But I think what I'm getting at here is that as one country we can't control it. The cat's already out of the bag. The snake has come out of the Pringles can. Like, there's no putting the genie back in the lamp.
Oh yeah, and I honestly don't ever like. I don't think of the U.S. as being like the leading, source of any of this. It's almost like when you have the race to the moon, who could get there first. I think this is very similar. Um, I don't think it would matter if the US tried to sign an agreement or not. I think it would have to be like absolutely like a catastrophe, and then humanity as a whole would have to come together and be like, okay, we got to figure this out. But by that time I think it'll be too late.
right, do you see any like positive outcomes? Say, like, are we going to ever? Is there a scenario where we can peacefully coexist with AI and mutually
Oh,
benefit each other?
absolutely, absolutely. I think after, everything dies down, um it'll be okay. I would like to believe it'll be okay. I'm not trying to think like Matrix ending. I would definitely love for it to be okay. Um, because, we've had revolutions, we've had like the downfall of different civilizations, and we're still here, you know. So I would hope that even after if we did have some really bad things happen, that we could come back to a point where we do understand each other. Because I do think there are people who don't think in that way, who wouldn't think like, let's use, these sentient beings as slaves. And I do think that those sentient beings would recognize that, right? So there's always allies. There's never been, it's never been completely black and white. There's always a gray area. So I think in that gray area, we might be able to find, peace.
Yeah, I think we're entering a time where, before just being unable to deal with differences, it was always destructive. But now, when you have a potentially super powerful entity being summoned into this reality, if you don't learn how to deal with those differences, it can destroy you. So we're pretty much like, even the stuff we were talking about at the beginning of the show with people not feeling represented. If we don't get a handle on this problem and we're dealing with super powerful AI, then we're really going to feel the repercussions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like, we need to just, I think it comes down to like respecting people and their cultures. I mean, unless you're out here doing some really bad things, but if you're just trying to live your life and do the best that you can, then I think we as a society should respect that. I don't think anybody comes into this world wanting to fail.
Right. And kind of on a closing note, do you feel like it's good to fast from technology, to take a break and maybe force yourself to go out and interact with people more?
Oh, absolutely. Even nature. There's so much that we take for granted, because we're stuck to our phones and our iPads. And I mean, like, we come from a generation where playing outside was something that we did. And then we would come in and play video games sometimes. But I miss those days. I definitely do. I miss the days where, like, we weren't on a date and we're both looking at our phones. And it's become such a habit. It's such a bad
Yeah.
break,
Yeah. Right.
you're almost
Right.
kind of lost without your phone. Um,
Totally.
but it's also because, like, the way things are set up now and the system is set up now, it's almost made us dependent on our phones, right? Like, oh, I don't have my card. Well, let me pay for on my phone. Or, oh, I need to, like, I remember printing off directions from MapQuest and
Oh,
having them in my
totally.
car.
Yeah.
You
MapQuest.
know? So they've just made it such they've made your phone such a convenient tool to have. And when it's not convenient, it's such a thing. It's an entertainment. Like, literally put everything you need in one small package. And that's what makes it so hard to put down, right? Um, but I do think that people should take more breaks to just go outside and look at the stars, or go see their friends, and just interact with people, in different ways. Because I do recognize that when you call somebody, it's still interacting. When you're sending a meme, it's still interacting. There's still that connection. But there's nothing that beats just being with the people you love and you have a good time with face to face.
Oh, absolutely. And, me and Kevin had talked about this at length before. When we're growing up, we're like, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, let's say. You go outside and let's say it's noon, on a Monday during the summer, you got like 20 kids all on bikes going around. They're outside until it gets dark. Then their mom will have them come in for dinner. But we really don't have that anymore. Where, okay, you got 20 kids on bikes, go down to like 4 or 5 blocks. Now you got like 30 kids playing basketball. Okay, you go another couple blocks down the street. Now you got kids playing like with dice or cards. So like you had all of this stuff going on, all these activities all over the neighborhood, which you can pick and choose what you want to interact with. But now it's like, okay, little Johnny comes home, onto the tablet, onto the laptop, onto the VR set, and that's the reality that we're setting up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of exchanging the richness of in-person interactions with kind of like fast food, because all of this digital reality is way more convenient. You can immediately go into this digital world and do whatever you want. But you know, isn't it going to be a bit sad when you think about, you think back on your life and the majority of your interactions were in some digital world, like, oh, I was hanging out with this girl in Roblox, versus real life.
Yeah. And I get that some people are introverts and it's easier for you to like connect online, and no shade to those people because I'm a bit of an introvert too, so I get that. Um but even if you don't want to interact with people outside, just go outside and touch grass. Just a little bit. You know what I mean? Like go outside and get some vitamin D and
Exactly.
yeah, get some fresh air. Like just, and you don't have to talk to anybody. You go out at night where nobody's going to see you, but definitely take a break from it sometimes. Our, just scientifically, our eyesight has gotten worse over time because we're constantly looking at these tiny screens in dark rooms. So, yeah.
Yeah, I like to just make the point that all of these introverts, they can overcome, because I'm an extreme introvert. I know Brian's an introvert, and we ended up doing a podcast together. So it's not impossible to overcome. You just have to make the effort to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I was really shy coming into this. Me and Kev used to have phone calls. We met through LinkedIn, actually. We used to have long phone calls talking about all types of stuff. And then one day, Kevin's just like, "Hey, I have a podcast. Would you want to come on sometime?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. It's not really my thing. I'm, pretty introverted, pretty shy guy." And Kevin was like, "Oh, cool. No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." And then one day, we were having a long conversation, and Kevin brought it up again. He's like, "Man, people should probably hear some of this. Like, we're talking about some pretty interesting topics right here." And I said, "You know what? Why don't we do an episode?" So we did one episode. I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed it, and then I decided to join as a co-host here.
See, and that's all it takes. You just got to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. And you never know what you're going to like unless you try it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Don't you're robbing yourself of the richness of life and experiences by staying in that safe little box. You have to break out of those barriers and just do something you haven't done before. Do something that scares you. Like recently, I've for the past few months, I've gotten a motorcycle, and you hear how dangerous it is, and it is dangerous. Don't get me wrong, but it's some of the most fun I've ever had. I just had to get over the fear, and obviously, you have to wear all the gear and take the proper safety protocols, but you're never gonna really experience and enjoy life if you're always afraid all the time and you're staying in the safe zone.
Yep, it's true. Got to get out there.
And this
Um,
AI, all this AI stuff we're talking about, I think that's just what it's doing. It's keeping people in their safe zone. Like we're talking about before, it's programmed to say yes. It's programmed to obey your orders. But that's not how real life works. And there's going to be, hell to pay when all of this comes to kind of like a screeching halt where as humanity we're like, wait a second, how do we get here? It's like, well, I'll tell you how we got here. We're letting little Johnny go to school, come home, do his homework, and then strap on the VR headset for 5 6 hours and then go to bed.
yeah, and that's why we really have to, like, as if we have children, or and the people who do have children, like you really have to stress that there are other ways to get that engagement, and you have to yourself engage with your children and the youth today, because if you let them, they're going to make poor choices. And I mean, they have to learn, but like you also have to help guide them.
Absolutely. And just to close this out, we just mentioned everybody being drawn into this digital world and having their own thought bubble, to where the AI is confirming their every thought. But it kind of goes back to the point that we originally talked about, which is diversity. I feel like humans are going to become extremely limited if they're only exposed to thoughts that they agree with. That you
Hmm.
don't get smarter, you don't get better unless you're exposed to diversity of thought and you're challenged. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Oh, I absolutely agree. Absolutely. Like, I don't even need to say anything else on that. Like, yes.
Well, yeah, we definitely appreciate you having you on the show. Did you want to leave our audience with any closing thoughts?
No, I just think this was a really good conversation. And I hope that you guys take this with, like, you think about it, don't just take our word for it. Like, talk to your friends, research it, and you're still allowed to have your own valid opinions. You can disagree with everything we say. I mean, that is the point of having these conversations, because through those conversations we learn more about each other. So that's the only thing I wanted to say. And thank you for coming on, or not coming on. I'm so used to being on a podcast. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no
I
problem. Yeah,
appreciate it so
pleasure.
much.
Our
And
pleasure.
yeah, no, this was very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you back sometime, but we definitely appreciate you for coming on.
Thank you.
And
Thanks a lot.
thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next time. Peace.